Democracy, and we are about to talk about the two types of democracy. What first is direct democracy, and then we will discuss the indirect democracy. So these are basically the categories of democracy. So what is a direct democracy? It is basically that in a direct democracy, all citizens, without intermediary of elected or appointed officials, they can participate in making the public decisions, such as a system is clearly only practical with relatively small numbers of people in a community organization to tribal council. For example, for a local unit of a labor union where members can meet in a single room to discuss issues and arrive at decisions by consensus of the majority vote. The ancient Athens is a very legendary city in today's Greece. And Athens is a place which is known to be the place where the first ever experiment of democracy was implemented. So the world's first democracy managed to practice direct democracy with an assembly of as many as 5,000 to 6,000 people. Whereas today, in current world, in contemporary world, Switzerland is the only country where direct democracy is being followed at the national level. Now come towards the indirect democracy. Indirect democracy is basically a set pattern of the rest of the countries in the world who claim to be practicing democracy as a major system of governance. So indirect democracy is basically that everybody has the right to take part in the government of his country, directly or through freshly chosen the representatives. Okay, the will of people shall be the basis of the authority of government, and this shall be expressed in periodic and genuine election that shall be held by universal and equal suffrage, and shall be held by the secret vote or the equivalent free voting procedures. Okay, as regards the indirect democracies, India and Pakistan are the examples of a representative democracy. Voting is one of the mechanisms that guides a democratic state and keeps its leaders on track. And it serves to let the leadership know how they have performed. And during elections, the citizens, they choose to vote for the candidate for their choice. The elected leader represent the people and govern for a set period of office. So the representatives are chosen through elections based on the constituency or the proportional representation system, or on a combination of the two. So let's talk about constitutional democracies now. Constitutional democracies are based on a written constitution or a supreme law that serves to guide the legislators and the laws they make. Written constitutions serve as a guarantee to the citizens that the government is required to act in a certain way and uphold certain rights, which means The strength of a real democracy depends upon certain fundamental rights and freedoms. Okay. These rights and freedoms must be protected to make sure that a democracy will succeed. In many countries, these fundamental rights are found and protected by the constitution. And in here, I must record this thing into or bring this thing in record that the chapter 2 of the Constitution of Islamic Republic of Pakistan 1973 is basically a document that guarantees all civic rights which are allocated to all Pakistanis regardless of their sect, caste, gender, religion, language, color, creed or geographical area. So it means that the constitution also sets out the structures and other laws. It is normally protected from amendment by the whim of a particular government by having a special majority required before any clause can be changed or through submitting any changes to voters through a referendum. जी
सर
हाँ जी फरमाएं
सर सॉरी फॉर इंटरप्शन एक क्वेश्चन है जो मुझे लिबरलिज्म की भी टॉपिक पे करना था और अब इस पे भी करना है कि सर ये जो डेमोक्रेसी है ये इस्लाम के साथ कंपैटिबल है कि नहीं है सर इस पे एक आर्ग्यूमेंट दिया जाता है ना कि डेमोक्रेसी जो होती है वो मेजॉरिटी पे दी जाती है और उसमें जो लॉ बनते हैं वो पार्लियामेंट के कुछ लोग जो होते हैं वो डिसाइड करते हैं और वही इम्प्लीमेंट किया जाता है
डियर स्टूडेंट
इस्लाम में ऐसे होता है
डियर स्टूडेंट मैं थोड़ा सा आपको रोक रहा हूँ आप पहले तो अपना नाम बताएं मुझे
सर
मारूफ अगर आपकी इजाज़त हो तो मैं ये लेक्चर कंप्लीट करके आपका इस सवाल का जवाब दे दूं
जी सर मैंने वैसे लास्ट में इसलिए नहीं किया था क्योंकि लास्ट टाइम भी ऐसे ही हुआ था कि टाइम खत्म हो गया था और मेरा क्वेश्चन रह गया था
तो बस अब आप इस क्वेश्चन को संभाल के रखें मैं लेक्चर कंप्लीट करके आपका इस सवाल का जवाब इंशाल्लाह दूंगा ठीक हो गया
ओके सर थैंक यू
Okay, so coming back to the last point of the current slide. So basically, the constitutional democracies are normally run by the constitution, and constitution is basically a sacred document, and it has to be it has to be like, for example, the governments and the state itself desires to protect the constitution. So a constitution has to be or it has to be protected from all sorts of unnecessary amendments so that nobody dares to change the constitution. So it is normally, the constitution is normally protected from the amendment by the whim of a particular government by having a special majority required before any clause can be changed or through submitting any changes to voters through a referendum. With an upsurge in the number of democracies holding free and fair elections and declaring themselves democratic states, some theorists have developed a set of minimum requirements. So elections on their own do not make a country democratic. Basically, it provides both a good overview of what democracy means and a standard against which to test whether or not a country is democratic. Okay, so prerequisites of a democracy. Number one, Control over the government. Control over the government decisions about policy constitutionally vested in the elected representatives. Elected representatives chosen in a frequent and fair elections. Elected representatives exercise their constitutional powers. All adults have the right to vote in elections. And all adults have the right to run for public office. So citizens have the right to express themselves on political matters defined broadly without the risk of state punishment. Please increase the size of the slide so that everybody should easily can see it. Otherwise, there is no point of sharing this presentation. Okay, so ninth is citizens have the right to seek out alternative sources of information such as the news, media, and such sources are protected by law. Citizens, they do have the right to form independent associations and organizations, including independent political parties and interest groups. So government is autonomous and able to act independently from outside constraints such as those imposed by the alliances and blocs. So if any of these conditions is not present, political scientists, they argue that the country is not truly a democracy. Anyways, so educating citizens, this is basically something which we are going to discuss regarding the criticisms of the government. So educating the citizens about the democracy in which they live means that educators will provide them with some of the tools to analyze their circumstances. So in some instances, this may provoke a strong critique of the government, the power it has, the way it functions, and whether or not it appears to be fulfilling the promises made during the election times. Similarly, the educators will want to prepare themselves for dealing with this critique in a very constructive manner, so that the learners also learn how to deal with their criticisms in a democratic and peaceful way. So democracy is more than a set of constitutional rules and procedures that determine how a government functions. So in a democracy, government is only one element coexisting in a social fabric of many and varied institutions, political parties, organizations, and associations. So this diversity is called pluralism, and it assumes that the many organized groups and institutions in a democratic society do not depend upon the government for their existence, legitimacy, or authority. Okay, coming towards the pillars of democracy. Now there are certain pillars which are necessary in order to claim that the country is being run on the democratic principles and exercising democracy as a political system. So number one, sovereignty of the people, the concept of the sovereignty of people. Number two, the government based upon the consent of the masses. Democracy is something, a rule, the majority rule, in which the majority rules and the minority is protected through the concept of rights given in the Constitution. Then guarantee of the basic human rights, free and fair elections, equality before the law, due process of law, constitutional limits on the government, and socio-economic and political pluralism. Okay, let's talk about the merits of democracy. So the merits of democracy is or are firstly the participation of the individual members in the government facilitates to enlist their sympathy and cooperation to the success of the government. So it is an effective form to educate the public about political, economic, and social affairs. It is also helpful to promote the patriotism among the people and prevents occurrences of violent revolutions. It also helps to make progress and development, and it enables changes to take place in a very peaceful manner. It also ensures to the people about the freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, and peaceful assembly and action. And it guarantees liberty and equality, which are necessary for a peaceful and sustainable human development process. Whereas every system, which is a man-made system, does contain some demerits. So let's talk about the demerits. Democracy sometimes leads to establish the majority view over the minority view. The party leaders and the political office holders in government control the citizens and the members of the party. It does not encourage individuals to give their opinions. And it is a very expensive form of government because elections have to be conducted periodically to various offices. It is also difficult to prevent corruption and malpractices. And it is also known as government by amateurs and lead to domination of masses.